Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Personal Monthly Budget. In this week's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to be creating a personal monthly budget all from scratch. We're going to show you how to create your own budget using a very little bit of VBA code, some really amazing charts, a very cool drop-down shape-based semi-transparent pop-up menu, and a bunch of other really cool things. So I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got a really cool, very unique training, something we haven't covered before, a lot of new features. If you're joining us for the first time, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. I create these videos each and every Tuesday, absolutely free. You can get the downloaded workbook. Just check the links in the description below, always for free. Click on any of those links, either with your email or Facebook Messenger. We create these each and every week for you. So it's a lot to cover today, so we should get started right away. Before I do so, I want to make sure to let you know during these difficult and strange times, nothing is better than controlling your own destiny, your own finances, and your own future. The best way to do that is take your Excel talents and create automated recurring income. And I love to do that. I've been doing that for many years, and I want to show you just how you can do that through our Excel for Freelancers mentorship program. A mentorship program I started a few months ago. We're going to be creating an amazing accounting applications every step of the way. I'm going to show you how you can define, design, develop, and deploy your own Excel applications. Our students are loving it, gaining brand new jobs and a brand new confidence on how they can create their own applications to sell on the marketplace. So I hope you'll join us there. Thanks so much. Let's get started with the application. In this application, what I want to do is I want to create a very simple, very easy to use personal monthly budget. So let's get started. I'm going to color this top row all the way. I do have a few things. All I have is a list of types, of basically expense types, and I have a list of months. That's all we have, just to make things a little bit quicker, but that's all I've done so far, just trying to make things easier. I do have a list of expenses based on those types here, just a small table of expenses. That's going to help us move things along. There's no code, no formulas, nothing else. We're going to do everything from scratch right with you. So let's format this top cell. I'm not going to go with a fade on this one, just a basic color green, keeping things real simple, and I'm going to do that. Actually, let's clear that out. We don't need that. And I also want to clear this bottom row, put that as green too. So the idea is to create the first row. We'll just put a title on that, something. We'll call this Personal Monthly Budget. I think that's an appropriate title, and I want to, obviously, if I've got a green font, I'm going to put a white font there with a green background, make it bold, and then I'm going to use one of my favorite fonts, which is Arial Rounded. It's kind of clear and nice. So let's select that. That's one right here. It's something you can use too, and then I'm going to increase the font probably to about 26 or so. That should be good. I'm going to merge and center that across just about here, and we're going to put in some icons too. So the idea is, the first thing I want to do is we need to know the year. So I'm going to put in the year here, and then I'm going to have this B2 used for the year, and the next one I'll move one over. Let's go with D, and I want the users to select a specific month. So I'm going to put the month in here. Let's just say we have January here, and then we have, let's say, 2020 here. Okay, so we get an idea. I'm going to right justify these two, and then left justify the month and the year here, so we can get a little bit clearer. I also want to make these bigger, a little bit bigger, and also white font too. Obviously, we need to clear it out and make them big. 14 should be perfect here. So basically, I want to select them. Let's make that a little bit more clear. Bold will get it done. Okay, so, and also I want to know the monthly budget, right? We have to be able to set a monthly budget. So let's put that in here, monthly budget. And then whatever the monthly budget would be, let's just say 3,500. So that gives us, and I'm going to format this as a currency because we want that, and I'm also going to left justify it here. Actually, we'll make it a currency here and then left justify it. In this run, I'm going to right justify. Again, also 14 on the font and white font and bold on that. So it's consistent with everything else we have. All right, so basically the user is going to be able to select a year, select a month here, and I'm going to make a really cool, I'm not going to use a drop down menu as we always do. I'm going to use a pop-up shape base, something very cool, something very unique, and then users will be able to enter whatever monthly budget they want here. Okay, so that's going to be great. Everything else is going to be white here, kind of basically sim. And what I want to do is I want to create a table here of all of our expenses and then the amount here probably. So let's do that. Let's copy over those so we know what those are. I'm going to copy them over here. I just want to know, I want a list of, there's going to be two different lists, one for the graph data and one for our other data. So I want to show you that, and then we'll put some icons in there. Okay, so I-10, what I'll do is I'll paste in those values, and that's just going to paste on all our expenses. And what I'd like to have is the actual expenses here based on the date that they select and based on the year that they select. So I want that all in here. We can bring this over a little bit. So the idea is to have totals here, a graph here, put it maybe like a donut chart here based on those. And then I'm going to put some icons here. Let's bring in those icons because I would like to have some icons that also show you. So I've got all these icons based on the categories that we've inserted. And let me just size those down appropriately. And let's say 0.4 should be sufficient on both the height and the width. That'll give us a nice look. That's big enough. And then I'm going to bring those over here. One of those, this $sign I'm going to use for this here, but we do need to change it to white. I guess I could leave it. It's kind of a nice color. All right, we'll leave that. That kind of looks nice, just like it is. We don't need to color it white. It stands out nice. So we have personal monthly budget, and we have all these icons. So let's set this up in order, and then basically I'll show you what I want to do. So I'm going to put in I want to try to keep it as consistent as possible. So the auto would go up here, and I would like to have the utilities here just basically in the same order that it is currently. All right, let's make all the widths the same. That way all the heights can be relatively different in the width. So let's do 0.4 and then the heights can be different. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I'm going to have, let's say I've got 12 different icons. So I'd like to put something like 4 across by 3 down. Now I'm not going to do all this aligning with you watching because otherwise it'd be boring. So let me go ahead and align these and then I'll be right back. Okay, now that I have them aligned, basically I've got 12 different icons representing the 12 different categories here. The last one being unrecognized, that's going to be this. Everything else obviously auto, utilities, bills, everything's here. So under each one of those, what I'd like to have is a total, and then under that I would like to have also basically what it is, the description of it. So I'll go ahead and add some more text-based shapes here, and this one's going to be for the total. So let's add that in right now. The total is going to be basically based on a specific cell. So I'm going to set that a specific size, probably something around the 0.43, and then a width of about maybe width of 1, or maybe we can make it a little bit smaller. We don't need it that big. Okay, and the width of 1. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I'm going to center this, and then I'm going to give it a font, something a little bit larger so that we can clearly see it, probably something like 14, and then I'll make it bold. And then I want it to equal basically whatever's going to be the total here. So that's important. I don't want any border on this, so we'll say no border. And then once we get it all just right, we'll repeat it. So we're going to have to say no fill, and also no border on that, so no outline on that. Okay, so we have our text base. Now what's it going to equal? Let's just say that we have a total here. Let's just say 101. I want it to equal that. So let's just put in that formula that's going to automatically set that shape to equal whatever's here. So 101 is fine, but I want to format that also. I want to make sure that that's set as a currency, so we can do that just clicking here. And that's going to set the currency here automatically, but I didn't even make that a little bigger to 14. Remember, as you link it, it's always going to link it, so just keep that in mind. If we link it again, if I clear it out and I link it equals, it's going to revert back to whatever the cell is, so keep that in mind. So notice the formatting also reverted, so keep that in mind. You might need to reset that a few times if you're going to relinking it, so we'll be sure to do that. And then I'll set this to bold. So now we have a good clear amount field, and I want that amount field to show up directly under this, so keep that in mind. I want it all centered in directly, so I want to do the same thing for each one of those. Of course there'll be a formula in here, not just the amount, so we're going to set that up soon. Okay, so I want this same thing, and I'm going to update the font just before we duplicate it. So I'm going to go to size and properties, and then I'm going to set the text properties. I just don't want to make sure there's any spacing or margin, internal margin around that. So I'm going to remove all the internal margins, and I'm going to duplicate that, Control D, and I'm going to duplicate that 11 different times. So just give me a chance while I do that. What I want to do is I want to then link each individual one to that, and we're going to put in a sum if. The sum if is going to be based on our expenses located in sheet 2, so that's going to help us. And then what we'll do is we'll just keep, I'm just using Control D to duplicate these. So duplicate and then duplicate. Okay, so let me go ahead and line those up. Just a second. Okay, also what I'll do is I'll align the middles here, align the middle just like that, and then I'll do the same thing for these, just holding down the Control and then align the middle, and then the same thing here, holding down the Control, aligning the middle. And then I'll do is I'm going to position them right above there. And now we just have to do one more type of alignment. So I'm going to hold my selection, and then for each one I'm going to make sure that they're also aligned inside the center. So we want everything centered just like that. So I'm going to use my selection tool, highlight everything, and then align the center, and then align the center here, align the center here, and then I'll move them over, make sure they're spaced equally apart, because I want, and we're going to get rid of course the grid lines too. We don't need the grid lines in this, but I'll keep them for just a little bit so we can see. Okay, so they look all properly spaced out. Sometimes it's hard with the grid lines to see it. I also want to make sure that we have, it looks like everything is lined up properly. So we have one last thing to do as far as this. I want to put the description. What type of description? I want to put it's going to be after a small text so we can see everything. But let's add, I'm just going to duplicate this here. And then what I'm going to do is I want a smaller font. It's going to be something like 8 and probably not bold, because we've got a lot of text to fit in. So what is the text? Well, the first thing is basically it's going to be equal. We can, of course, we can type it in here, or we can do equals. Either one would work just fine. So basically it can be equals that. Auto and transfer. Again, notice how it reverted back, although it still says 8. So we just need to enter it 8. Click on here, enter the 8 again, and then we're good to go. So probably 8 is going to be, it's going to have to be kind of small because I need to fit in all that text there. So that's important. Okay, so we can probably increase it slightly. Let's say 8.5. All right, that should be good. That'll be covered. So now I'm going to do the same thing for this, and then I'm just going to update the formula. So this is going to be 11. And then I'll do all the fonts at the same time. It's much easier. This is going to be 12. So all we're doing is moving down. It's a little bit easier. Control D, duplicate it. This will be 13. Again, Control D, duplicating it. I'm going to bring it down here right below it and change this to 14. And then I'll do all the fonts back to about 8.5, I think. And then Control D again. Sometimes if you watch me do it, even though it's a little bit boring, sometimes you can at least see the shortcuts that I use. See that one. Control D again. This would be 16. Control D. And then 17, so that's going to cover our kids and family. Control D one more time, dragging this over below our otherwise and make this 18. So you see, we can build these pretty quickly just by using the links. And then once we do that, I'll select them all and then update that 19, and then we have 2 more to do. So this would be 20, and our last one, of course, is uncategorized. So we're going to duplicate that and go to 21. Okay, so now what we need to do is update the fonts so that they can fit 8. 8.5 should be good. Let's go ahead and select all of these, holding down the Control, selecting every single one of them we just created, and then changing the font to about 8.5. So 8.5, recentering that. Now they're all pretty much covered. Okay, that looks really good. Now we're getting some, so we can see if we click on the view and click on the grid lines, it's a much easier to look at here based on this. But we'll keep the grid lines just for now, and then at the end we'll take them. So it gives you an idea of what we're doing. I'm going to also use my selection tool and just make sure everything is centered again here, just to make sure that we have everything nice and lined up here. And then that's going to cover all of our text. I want to make sure to incorporate all the text as well. And then we can line it up. So it's looking really good. So now what we can see is we have our different categories all lined up, and I'll update this. Okay, good. So it's looking really good now. We have all of our things here. There's a few ones. Let's just I'll make sure to include this one, drag it over here. All right, so let's center these here, align the middle, make sure we get everything covered. Good. And then the last thing we want to do is just make sure that the font on these texts are all equal. I'm going to bring these, drop them down. I'm going to align the bottoms of these, and then I'm just going to bring them up. Everything looks good. I'm going to do the same thing for this, also aligning the bottom, so we have the center and the bottom all aligned. Everything's nice and aligned accordingly, looking good. And the last one will be, again, align the bottom, and I'm probably bring this one up a little bit so that it's right under there. Okay, and then this one down a little bit is too close. Okay, so everything's nice and lined up for the most part. I'll monkey with this a little bit later on, but for the most part, it looks good. With the grid lines, it's a little hard to see, but we can get a better idea of how things are going to look from here. Now, one thing we really want to do, once we get it all, I want to group it. I want to group everything because it's much easier to deal with that, but we need to update the links individually. Notice they're all 101. So what I want to do is I'm going to first work on our formula here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to update these amounts so that they're accurate. So what is that formula? Well, to create a formula, let's create some named ranges first. I think that's really important. So what are those named ranges going to be? Well, they're going to be based, some of them are going to be based on the date, the category, and the amount of our expense history data. So let's start out with that, and we'll create some dynamic named ranges based on each of those so we can use them inside the formulas. Okay, so we can create our named ranges. Let's take a look. New, the first one we want to do, let's see expense, date, and what is that going to do? We're going to use an offset. I want a dynamic named range. So what is that? Named range is going to be based on this date here, this one right here. I'm going to include the headers just to make sure if there's no data, but I'm going to use offset and then set it down one row below. So expense, starting there, comma 1, started at one row, comma, and then count A. What do I want to count? I want to count all the data in that column, starting with the header row, because if there's no data, it won't create any error. But then, of course, I'm going to create a lot of, obviously not to 5999, then and then -1. Why am I minusing 1? Because I really don't want to count the header, but I want to include it in the formula, because if there's no data, it won't create an error. Comma 1. So tab out, tab in, make sure that encompasses all the data. Now we have an expense data, includes all the data. I'm going to copy this formula, Control C, click OK. Now I want to create named ranges for both category and the amount. So new expense category, that's fine, we'll just call it category. Tab down, and then what I'll do, all I need to do is now change it to column B. Click OK. Tab in, make sure that it covers our category. One more for the account amount, the expense amount. Expense amount, and then tab over, just going to change that to column C. We can still count with column A, that's fine. This goes to C, tab out, tab in. Okay, good. Now we have our named ranges located for our expenses. So we're good, we can close that out. What else do we need? I also want to make sure that we have the months and the year. So let's create a named range for months, because we have a list of months here. All I did was just create a month. I'm going to call this months. That's going to help us out. And then also what I want to do is I want to know the selected month and the selected year. That's important to use in the formulas. This is our selected year. So I'm going to call that selected year. This, and our selected month is actually not this, because I want a number. I want to use the number. This is not going to help us too much, but I really want the number. So what is the selected months? I want to know the month number. What is the month number? Well, we can use doing match. Equals match, what is it? And we're looking up, what are we looking up? I'm going to look up January, and I'm going to look it up within the name range we just created, which is called months. And I want an exact match, so I'm going to use 0. Good, that's going to give us 1. I want this to be our selected month, so we're going to call that selected month. That's the one I want on. That's going to be on 08. That is our selected month. I'm just going to wrap that in if error, just in case there's an error. It'll go to blank, just in case every once in a while, in case there's a wrong month enter or something. It's always good. Okay, so if there's an error, so this is the month that the user selects. That's going to help us in our formula. We need to know that formula because I need to know the totals. And I want 2 totals. I want one total for this, and I want another total. These are going to be relatively the same. This is going to be for our graph. Why do I want 2 totals? I want 2 totals because our graph, I want to, if there's no value, I want it to show NA. And because if there's no value, if it's a 0, I want to show NA, because in our graph it won't show anything that has NA. But in our uncategorized, I do want to show 0. So I'm going to put 2 of them. So how do we determine, now we have our named ranges, how do we determine how many, what is the formula to determine the total auto and transport expenses for the selected month? In this case, it's January. How do we determine that? Well, we can do that using a sum if formula. What formula would that be? We'll be using sum if. So let's use that. Equals sum ifs. And what are we summing? What's the sum range? Of course, that's going to be the expense amount, the one that we just created. So the sum range is easy. But what is the first criteria? It's going to be multiple criteria. And it's going to be based, basically, it has to be within January, and it has to have the auto and transport. So any transactions or any expenses within the month of January, also that are auto and transport, are going to be included, should be summarized. So let's set our first criteria, and let's say that it would be after the 1st of January. So how do we do that? So we can use it by date. So first of all, we want to know the criteria range, and that's going to be expense date, right? Because that's the one. And what is the criteria for that? It would have to be greater than January 1st. How do we write that? Well, we can use a quotation mark, greater than or equal to, and what? And a date, January 1st. But how do we write the date in so it's going to work always, regardless of the format? We can use the date function. Date, what is the year? The selected year. We know that because we just use that as a named range. What is the month? Well, we know it's the selected month because that's the one we just did. And what is the day? It's going to be the 1st. Regardless of the day, it's going to be the 1st. So it's got to be greater than the 1st. That is going to cover it. What else? We have more criteria. It has to be less than the end of the month, right? Less than the end of January. So how do we do that? Well, again, quotation marks, less than or equal to, but this time we're focused on the end of month. So it would be and EO month. We can use EO month. What is the month? Again, the end of the month. Again, same thing, January. Dates, using date. Year, of course, would be selected year. We have already figured that out, selected year. What is the month? We know that, selected month, because we want the month number. And then 1 for the day 1. But what about, this is the end of the month. So how many months before or after? Would be 0. We want this 0. That's going to get us the last day of the month, in this case January 31st. Okay, that covers 2 criteria. We've got one more. It's got to equal basically auto and transport. So the criteria in this case would be the expense category. The expense category would have to be equal to this auto transport right here. Okay, one more thing we need to do, of course, we need to add in, I just got to add in the criteria. Again, this would also be expense date, right? Because we have to add in 2 criteria. Expense date, there we go. So it's the criteria range and then the criteria. Again, the criteria range and then the criteria. The criteria range here on the last one, right? Criteria range here and the criteria. Now we've got it complete, so the total is 101. Now we can just make sure that we use it. Now we can just copy that down all the way down here because we've named ranges all the way down to categories. Now it's perfect. That's exactly what I want. We can bring this down a little bit. We don't need to create it so much. So it's very nice. Now what I want to do, I want to have total expenses. So how do we get to total expenses? It would just be total expenses here. I'll create some more room. It's a little bit too, and then I'm just going to be equal to, of course, this is the sum of everything above. Pretty simple there. Just going to highlight all the rows, and that's going to be because I do want the total sum, but I also want to know the budget, right? So I want to know what is the monthly budget for January, but I want to put it here. So what would that be? Because I want to include January, the month here, total equals, in this case, January, and because I want it to change with the month, and quotation space budget, just like that. There. And so what is the January budget? Of course, that's going to be whatever is located in I2. So here. So now we have the January budget. And I also want to know what's remaining. And that's, of course, simply the budget minus the total expenses. So it's going to be equal the budget of $3,500 minus the total expenses. That's how we get our budget. Good. I want to make these bold because I want to make them look. And let's give them a nice look. Something a little bit different. I also want to get some lines in here. So I'm going to format those cells. Just right click, format those cells. The border, I'm going to give it just a nice looking border, maybe a gray, and then a thick font here, something a little bit lighter. Here, thick font, and I'm going to use the middle and the bottom. So that way they're differentiated. It kind of looks nice. We can see it here. I'm going to give it a little more space here too, because I give it that. And before I do that, let's just group these so we don't move them like they did. So I'm going to highlight everything, select everything. I'm going to group it. Now remember, once you group something, make sure you right click, go to the size and properties, and make sure you always set the properties to move but don't size. Because I don't want this to move. I spent a lot of time organizing this and I don't want to mess it up right now. So now we can move it. Everything's going to stay the same and we get a nice separation there. That's what I want. A little bit longer here. Okay, so we have our totals. Let's set some more borders here. So we can say I'm going to format those cells. All right, I just right click, format those cells, and make this a little bit more clear. I'm going to make it a little bit darker because it's more important, and I'm going to give it the double lines on the bottom and the middle. Okay, so that looks right. Now we can see differentially between those two. So very important, set these formats to the same as everything else, which is the currency format. and set them right here. Now they're all the same. Now we have it. And now, of course, when we change our month, let's just say February. Of course, I'm going to use a drop-down list on this, so don't worry. Okay, February, everything changes. Perfect. That's what I want, okay? And of course, there's no data for 2021, so everything should go to 0 when I change the year. Perfect, that's what I want. But February budget's the same. Perfect. Okay, so we'll change that back to 2020. So we know that our data and our formulas are working just the way we want to. But let's add in some more. What else do I need? I need to link these. Remember, I need to link these totals here because they're not linked correctly yet. This one's on 112, this one's on 101, this one's has not been. This should be the 13, right? Our education is row J13, so let's update that, and then I'll have to update the fonts again as I link them. Let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now everything's linked. All these totals are now linked: J21, J20, J19, J18, and so on. So now once I reset the links, of course, I also need to reset those fonts. So let's just hold down the control, click on each one of those, make sure they all go back to bold and all go back to font 14. So I'm going to select that, change that to 14, which is what I want, and change it to bold. Now everything's consistent, everything's the same, and now when we change this to February, all those values will update. And of course, I'm going to set a really cool drop-down list for the month. Okay, that's what I want. Perfect. Looking very good. Let's save our work. And now what I want to do is I also want to fill out this for the graph. I want to do almost the same thing as this. So I'm going to copy that, but I need to know if it's 0. If it's 0, I'm going to put NA. So I'm going to copy this basically, and I'm going to put it right here. Paste it in right here. But what I really want to do is if the value, so I'm going to put it if this value is equal to 0, then what do I want to do? Put it to NA. So NA, I want to have that NA, otherwise paste the value. Otherwise I want the value. So end quotes. Okay, we can get rid of this equal. We no longer put the equals. Now we're good to go. So now we can enter that and we get 112. So for anything that's no balance, we want to make sure, and we just drag that down there, and let's put in something. We want to make sure that it shows NA when there's no balance. January had one. So type in January and we'll create the drop down list shortly. Perfect, that's what I want, NA. That's going to be perfect for our graph. What kind of graph do we want? I want a donut graph. I think that would look really nice. Let's shrink this so we can see it. And let's build a donut graph for this. So I'm going to highlight all this in the data, and I'm going to create a donut graph. I'm going to place it right about here. So I'm going to insert. I want to insert other charts, and I'm going to choose donut, something like this. And that's about what I want, but I want to customize that a little bit here. Okay, the first thing what I want to do is, let's say I'm going to add, I don't want a legend, but I do want to have data labels. So let's show the data labels, and I want to put them outside, but I don't want them exactly like that. So let's format the data labels here. And what do I really want? I really want to put the category name here, but I don't want to have the values, and I want to put them on the outside of them. So we're going to bring that out and make it much bigger too. So it's really nice to see. Let's bring the whole size into something much smaller, about like that. That's going to give it, and I also want to make it bigger so we can see everything. Let's select it and enlarge it so that we can get a good look at the field. And then I'm going to also take the values and I'm going to put them outside. I don't want them inside there. And bring it up a little bit bigger so we can see it nice and big. That's what I want to see. Great. Bring these out a little bit here so we can see them. Just going to move them up a little bit because in this older version we don't have this on the donut chart as far as outside or leader lines. But I like using older versions of Excel because many of our users don't have those versions. So it's important that I try to stay specific. And let's format these just so we can see them a little bit better. And what we'll do is I'll just format those, and I'll give it a little bit of a bold font, something a little bit clearer, and maybe one bigger. Okay, so that gives us an idea. Now remember, newer versions of Excel will have leader lines for these. All right, that's what I want. I want a title, so let's move this down a little bit and just give this a little bit of a text box. I'm going to insert a text box here, and I'm going to call this spending by category. So spending by category. And then I'm going to center that, increase the font, and make it bold so we can get a nice, clear, good. I also want to duplicate that this time, but this time I want to have another chart. I want to have maybe some type of a cylinder, but this one I want it dynamic based on this. So I want this to be equal to whatever this is here, January budget, because I want to show it by month. So let's use that equals, and then I'll put here, whatever's in here, January budget, I want that. And again, let's reformat to make sure that it's the same as this. So again, 22 bold, just as the way we have the other one. So everything matches 22 and then bold. All right, so we don't need, I'm gonna hold down the control. I'm gonna align these to the middle, make sure they're both the same. And I'm gonna remove the borders. I don't need an outline on these ones. Okay, so one more. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna highlight the total expenses and the January budget. Total, because I wanna know both. I wanna know what the current expenses are and what the budget is. And I wanna show that in some sort of a cylinder chart. So we're gonna click Insert, and then bar, and then cylinder. I'm going to choose this one right here. And that's what I want, but it's going to have to make a lot of changes to this. So first of all, let's reset let's set this color to gray just so we can differentiate. This is the one. This, of course, is going to be the budget. So let's format that data series, and I'm going to give it a fill, a solid fill of, let's say, gray on this one. Just this color gray, and then the other one's going to be green. So let's change this one itself to green. So I'm going to format this specific data point. I'm going to give this a solid fill, but this one I'm going to choose our same theme green here so we can see it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the data here. I'm going to switch that. So I'm going to go into the select data, and then I'm going to switch the row and the column. What that's going to do is it's going to give us exactly what we want. I'm just going to reset this to gray because I want them in the same. So I'm going to go back to fill, solid fill, and then choose the gray one again. So I want to differentiate. Nice. That's basically what I want, but I don't want anything else. So in this particular case, we're going to check. We don't need a legend, so we can click no legend. We don't need any data labels also. We don't need any access, so we can just delete. I can click on the access, delete them. I can click on this, delete it. I really don't need anything else. All I want to do is see the eventual data. So that's all I want to do is see the cylinder here. So I'm going to basically delete everything else, including this one right here. Okay, good. So again, format that. I'm going to format the chart here. I want no fill, so no fill and no border, no line. Good, that's exactly what I want. I'm going to increase the chart so it's the maximum, the width, the size, and then I'm going to reduce the entire width just so it doesn't encompass everything. So I'm going to select it and then bring the whole thing down a little bit so we can get a nice look right above it. So there we go. So it's going to fill it out. That's what I want. I want to show exactly. I also want to show a little bit more. I want to put that in numbers. So I want to know, again, so let's take a look at this. I also want to know what is left, right? So how much is left? What is our budget and what is left? So that's important. What is left in this case is $22.59. That's what I want in a text. So I'm just going to copy this here, duplicate this one, and then I'm going to use it again, basically, and then reset the format. So what do I want here? Equals whatever's remaining here. So I'm going to click, which is in J24. Reset the font back to bold and 20. Let's increase the font a little bit on this one. Bring it over. We don't need that much space. So that is what's left, right? We have that. It's what's left. And then let's Control C. I'm going to copy another text box, use it here, increase the font. I want to show that it's left. So this is $22.59 left for the month. This one, we don't need any formula on this one, and I'm just going to type in some text, call that left. Then I'm going to group everything. So that's left, right? We have $22.59 left in expenses available for the month. Okay, good. So that's really nice. That's what I want to see here. Make that a little bit bigger so we can see it. So we can see our graph. Our January budget, we have $22.59 left. We have total expenses of $12.41, and it gives us a visual of what we have left. So I'm going to bring this. Let's bring this a little bit. We can shrink this one a little bit here. Bring this here a little bit to the left, and then hold down the control and just basically group everything together so it's nice. Right click, format. We don't want to hide, we don't want to size that with cells, so make sure we're always move but don't size with cells. Now it's really coming together. I don't want a background on this. Format those cells. We'll just go to format and then shape fill and then no fill. Won't make a difference as white in background. All right, that is looking really, really nice. We also have to add expenses. We want to be able to add expenses. Let's put a little bit of shadow on here, just something a little bit, picture effects, and put a little bit of a shadow. Not a big shadow, but that's a little bit too much. So we'll go into picture effects, shadow, and then I'm going to go into shadow options. I just want a very, very slight shadow, 3 point, and then just go back, just something to give it to lift it off the page a little bit. That's pretty good. That kind of lifts it off. All right, what do I want? I want to add an expense, right? We want to be able to add expenses to this. We have to have a button, and I'm going to actually use a user form in this one. So insert, what I'm going to do is insert a shape. I'm going to create a button, something very different. Remember, when we're creating buttons, we want to create something that stands out to the user. So in this case, an orange button would probably be appropriate, because so let's put in an orange button. And we don't need an outline, and then we'll put a little bit of a shadow on it, shape effects, and then shadow. Okay, so that's what I want. So what do I want? White font. I'm going to put a plus and just going to call it in all caps, add expense. That's what I want. I want to be able to use it to add expense. Obviously, we're going to need to make that bigger. So center that, and then make it bigger, and then make it bold. That's good. That's good enough for our button. And so we have add expense. So when they click this button, I want to pop up a user form to come up. It's just a simple pop-up form that puts the date, the amount, and the category. That's all I want. Click OK, and then when they click OK, I wanted to add them to this list. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look. All we need to do is go into VBA and create a very small user form. But before we do that, we also need to be able to select months and years. So I'm going to create a shape-based pop-up menu. Very cool. Let's do that right now before we get into that. So when we create this format, we also need to give the user the ability to click something. I want to click, we normally have a drop-down list, but let's give them some kind of icon to click so that they can get to that drop-down. I'm going to use something like this right here, this picture frame, this half frame here, and then I'm going to give it a shape fill of white, and then no border, shape outline, I'm going to say no outline, and then what I need to do is I want to turn it like this and then size it accordingly. So obviously we need to turn a little bit more. That's what I want, and then I'm going to give it a size, something like 0.2, and then I'll do a 0.2. That's kind of nice, right? So we move that over. Let's take a look at that and see if that looks. That's kind of nice. It's not quite, let's zoom in. It's not quite perfectly. Okay, that looks good. Perfect. Now I'm going to duplicate that, Control D, and I'm going to do the same thing for January. So now we can select the month. Now we can select the year. So that's kind of a nice icon. Let's go back to 100%. It's still a little bit thick, isn't it? That's kind of thick. Let's move that. It's a little bit thick. So let's bring it's a little bit too thick. So we can bring it a little bit lower and then a little bit lower here. I like that. Okay, I like that one better than this one. So I'm going to remove this one. Just duplicate this one here. That's really the effect that I want. Perfect. So that's going to be our drop down icon there. So users can drop that down back to 100%. So when they click this, they're going to get a nice drop down list. What kind of drop down list do I want? I want a shape based pop up. So let's create that. Insert. I'm just going to use the square, and let's set the size about, let's say 0.3, and then with a width of 1. And what is the naming of this? And I'm going to give it the same shape fill as we always do. No outline on this, but I'm going to use a transparency. I kind of want a different transparency, something a little bit transparent. So I'm going to go into more fill colors, and I'm going to set the transparency maybe about 10%. That's going to kind of give us a nice, click it OK, so we can see a little bit through it. Kind of a nice effect. All right, now we've got our shape, got our transparency, but I want to give it a specific name. 2020 is the name. I want to give it the same exact name as the year. And the text, of course, is going to be on this 2020. So I want to be able to use this. So let's center that, increase it, and make it bold so we can, there we go. So now I've got 2020. I'm going to duplicate that, Control D, bring it down here, and Control D, bring it down here. Actually, we could use a little bit of a border on that. So I'm going to do a very light white border, and I'm going to make that outline very light. So I'm going to go into the weight and just make it something like that. That looks nice. At least the user can see when the button separates. So this one's going to have a name of 2021. The name is very important. Name of the button, and of course the text. I'm going to do the same thing, of course, with the second one. I'm going to give that a name of 2022. And the text, of course, is the same thing, 2022. Okay, so we have our years now. Let's take a look, and I'm going to group them. I'm going to make sure they look aligned, but I'm going to make sure they're all aligned, and I'm going to distribute them vertically so they looks right. And then I'm going to group them. I want to call this years group. Okay, now I'm going to pretty much do the same thing for months, but this one I'm going to Control C. If I use duplicate, it's going to keep in the same group. So I want it outside of the group. So I'm going to Control C, Control V. That's going to create a month, but the month I need a little bit bigger probably. So let's just go with 1.2 on the width. And again, we're going to call this the same January. And then I'm going to also give it the text of January. The name of the button is very critical because we're going to use that in VBA with some very easy VBA code. January. All right. Very nice. So we have January. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to do the same procedure for every single month. So hang on while I do that and I'll be right back. Okay, I've now created all 12 months and I've named all of the shapes the exact month name. Very important, just like we did for the years. So each one has a very specific and unique name spelled correctly, hopefully, within the month. All right, let's go ahead and group those. So I'm going to hold down the shift and I'm going to group each one of those, and we're going to call that months group because I'm going to be able to show and hide that with a single line of code. So I want to make sure that they're grouped. I'm going to group them there, and then I'm just going to call this months group. Okay, so we have months group and year group. What I want to do is I want to click this icon here and I want to have this display. I want to select with one line of code and have that month change to here into E2. Same thing here. In the year, I want to be able to select this, have that appear, and select any specific shape and have it appear here. So we've got to write that code. That's just a tiny bit of code. And I also want to add expenses. So we're going to get into the VBA and write a little bit of code to make those things happen, to be able to add expense, to be able to change the year and change the month. So let's do that now. Inside the VBA editor, if you have the developers tab available, it'll be here under the Visual Basic. If not, you can reach the developers under the options. You can go into the customize ribbon, you'll see developers. Select that, will get you there. You can use also the shortcut Alt F11 to get you there. As you see, there's no code. We have budget. We're going to write in just a little bit of on-sheet code, and we're going to create also one module and one form. So let's do that right now. We're going to insert a module here, and let's just call this expense mac. We don't have very much code to write today, so most of this was the work was on the sheet. Expense macros, something very simple. And what kind of macros do we want? Well, I want to be able to add an expense. So how do we add an expense? I need to create a form to do that. Right? I want to create a pop-up form to do that. So let's create also the form. So right click, insert, and user form. I want to create a user form. Here's our user form here. It's going to be a very basic user form. Not much is going to be really going on with that. Just want to keep something very simple. Why don't we give this call this add expense form, something basic, and then I'll give it the name. I want to give it a caption of add expense. And just give the users the ability to add expenses with this form. Something very simple with 2 buttons and just a few different. And we'll give it a title. So let's go ahead and click on we'll get in the toolbox, and I'm going to create a title for this. I'll bring it up here. We'll just call it add expense. So I'll click inside here and call this add expense. And I want a larger font on that. So we're also going to center it. I want to align the center, create a larger font. So we'll go into Tahoma, something like maybe 16 and then bold. That should be sufficient, maybe 18, a little bit bigger. Click OK, that's good. Something nice and big we can see. I'll have other ones. I'm going to duplicate that, and what I'm going to do, and I will make it transparent. I want it transparent, so let's click transparent. And then I want to duplicate Control-C and Control-V, and I want to create some labels, but they're not going to be that big. So let's create, I'm just going to go down to the 12 font here. I don't want something so big, and let's just put on regular font, that'll be fine. And I'm going to let's right justify these because I want it on the right side, but I'll bring it over. The first one's going to be called date, so let's change this to date. I want a date. We can just put date, not add date. Date here. So I want a date, and then I want the amount, and then I want the category. So those are going to be the 3. So that should be fine. I'm going to duplicate that. Control-C, Control-V, and then this one's going to be amount. And then I'm going to put this equal to the same as date. Put that about right up here. And I'm going to make those, and then also we want one more for category. So let's control V and put in the category. That's going to be on the lower left, and 2 buttons. Going to have an OK and cancel. Category. Make sure I spelled that right. OK. Bring it out so we can fit it all in. And that's going to be placed down here, and then I'm going to have 2 buttons. So let's create the fields for that. I'm going to make sure these are aligned, and we'll line them, of course, to the middles here. And that's pretty good. So let's put in a date. Now let's put in some fields. So I'm going to put in a field here. I'm also going to make that 12 and make it a little bit bigger. So let's put the height as about 22. That should be sufficient. And we will also make this 12 font. So I'm going to go into the font here and then just change that to 12. That should be sufficient. And I'm going to, actually we can bring this over a little bit. We can add a little more space for this so we can bring it over. The date might take a little bit more space at 12 font. Okay, good. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to put it right up here for amount. So now we have an amount and date. I'm going to make sure everything is justified, so aligned to the middles. And then I also want a category, so I'm going to control copy that. Now we have a category. So actually, category is going to be a drop-down list because we already have the category. So let's put in a combo box here for the category, a little bit larger. Again, I'm going to put the height also as 22, just as our others, and the font also as 12, just like we did the others, so that we're consistent with that. So into the font we go and put that as 12. Okay, so we're good with that. Now we have everything set, but now we need our buttons, and we need a let's make this background white. So I'm going to make the back color white. All right, good. So we have add expense. It's just a basic form, but I want to create some buttons. I really don't want to create these buttons. I just don't like them. I don't like these buttons here. Are not very pretty. So let's create something different other than that button here. Let's create something more in line with our theme. And how do we get that? Let's save our work we've done. I'm going to take a picture of a button and then make that. So let's go down here anywhere outside of this. Just going to scroll down and I'm going to click insert, and I want to create a shape, and we're going to make a picture of this. So it's a great way to make a button. I'm going to call this OK, and then I'm going to format, center it, make the font white on this one. It's already white. Bold it and increase the font here. Okay, I like that, but not the colors. Shape fill, I want the shape fill. No outline on that. And then I'm just going to give it, I want a little bit of more of effect. So let's go with the preset effect, this one here. I like that. That's kind of nice and looks really good. So how do we do that? So I'm going to duplicate this, Control D, and then I'm going to create one for cancel because I want two buttons. So cancel. Now we've got two different buttons, and now we can use it. So, but how do we get these into it? These are sheet buttons. These are not form buttons, right? So how do we get that? Well, we can actually take a picture of it. I'm going to use Snagit Screen Editor. I'm going to take a picture of this. And since we're using a white background, it doesn't need to be perfect. That's good for that. So now I've got it in my Snagit software, and I'm going to do the same thing with the OK button. So let's take a picture of it. I'm using my link. I'm going to take a picture of this OK button. Perfect. Zoom in, and I'm going to save it. Now, don't save it as a PNG. Save it as a JPEG, okay? Now, it doesn't matter because we have a white background. It doesn't have to be perfect. We've got a white background on our form, but if we didn't, we might have to do some more work. So we've got the OK. I'm going to save this, and where am I going to save it? I'm going to save it in the folder that I'm working in. Okay, I'll just call this OK button. And then I want to do the same thing for the cancel. Cancel, zoom that in, just cut it up a little bit, make sure we trim it out a little bit, and we can keep the shadow on, so that's kind of a nice look, feel of it. So we can keep the shadow on, just trim it a little bit, and then I'm going to save this again. I'm going to save this as cancel button. Okay, very good. So now that we have that in there, and now we have those two, so now I'm going to go back into my form here, and I'm going to bring those in. So I'm going to take a picture. I want to bring it right in here. I want to bring that OK button right in here. So how do we do that? I'm going to browse for that button. We just saved it. So going into the picture, I'm going to click here and I'm going to browse for that. There it is. So I want the OK button here, and we can shrink that up just a little bit here. I like that. And then I want to do the same thing for the cancel button. So I'm going to bring in the cancel button here. And then I also don't want any borders or any background on that, so we're going to fix that. And then I want to click the picture, and I'm going to click the cancel button. Okay, so now I'm going to hold down the control, both of these. I want transparent, and I don't want any border on that, so we could just go with white border or something like that. Don't want anything. That's really the way I want. That's what I want. Okay, and cancel. Now we've got our form. Let's drag these over, center those a little bit. Good, good. Let's take a look at that. Take a look at that. Add expense date, amount, category. Okay, good. So we do need to assign, of course, a drop-down list to our category. We have OK and cancel. Those buttons are not doing anything yet. That's what I want. That's just what I want. Kind of a plain form. We can get rid of these buttons now. We're done with those. We've just taken a picture, so we're good with those. Let's get in and let's start assigning some macros. And of course, we want to make sure we assign the categories. But let's do that. We need a named range on those categories. Very important because we're going to use those inside. So back into our sheet, we can just call these, I'm going to highlight all these, and we're going to call it categories. Categories is that same named range that we're going to assign within our code. Okay, good. So we have our form, and let's just start assigning some values and some code to this. So right click and go into the view the code, and we don't have any code right now, but what kind of code do we want to have? Well, the first thing what we want to do is I want to assign a cancel button. Let's just try that. So let's name, actually we still need to name it. Let's go ahead and name our information because that's going to be a lot easier to view the object. We're going to call this, I give that expense exp date. Very important to name those so we can work with them. I don't want the default names. And then we're going to call this expense amount, expense amount. Okay, and then of course we're going to call this expense category. Expense category. That's fine for now. Now we can refer to those by name. Very important. Also the buttons too is very good. I'm going to call this OK button and then the cancel button. Once we refer to them in the code, much easier, we know exactly what they are. OK, call this cancel button. Now that we've everything named, we can go back into the code, view the code, and start working on that. So we have here's our cancel button. Now watch this. There's no, let's close this. We don't need this. There's no click. So how are we going to get a click? We can make it. We don't need it, right? So let's just get rid of all this. We don't need that. Backspace that. Forget drag over and just type in click. Click. Now we've assigned a click event. So what do we need to do? Basically, I just want to close the form. So add expense form dot hide. Really what I want to do. And maybe unload the form too. Unload, which is going to clear it out. Unload, what do we want to do? I want to load add expense form. Great. Okay, so does that work? Let's just take a look. Let's run that. Let's view the object, play that, click on the cancel, and it's working perfectly. That's what I want. You see how that works? Now, I really like the looks of those buttons. There is one disadvantage is they don't have a tap stop. So keep that in mind. That's one slight disadvantage. But if you have a simple form like this, it should be sufficient. All right, so now what do we want to do? Now what I want to do is I want to initialize the form. I want to make sure we assign a category to that when we activate the form, actually, so we can go back into the code. And when we activate the form, we want to do something. What do I want to do? I want to go in the user form and I want to basically create an event on activate. When the form is activated, I want to assign the expense category to categories. I want to assign the categories to our drop-down list. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that pretty simple. Expense category. I think category. What do we want to do? Row source. What does it equal? It equals categories. That named range we just created. Categories. Categories. Okay. And also what do I want to do? I want to actually set the default expense date. So expense date dot value equals what? Equals the current date. But let's just put it in a format. It pretty much equals the date. But let's format that. Format doesn't work in every version of Excel. Sometimes you have to use application, function, text for formatting it. So, but we can use format. It works fine here. Format, what do I want? Format the date, and I'm going to give it the /, that's the same, DDYYYY. Okay, that's the format that I want. So those two things are going to happen when I run the form. Let's take a look. Let's go ahead and double click it and run that form. Now we have the current date. We can put in the amount and the categories are all set up. Perfect. That's what we want. So now all we have to do is set the OK button and then just set the date. So what do I want to do on OK? When it's OK, I want to find the first available row here. I want to place the date, the category, and the amount. But I want to make sure that the user has first filled out all those. They're all required. We can't add an expense without actually doing it. And then of course I want to tie that to this button here. So let's do that. So back inside the code, let's go in and view the code and let's start writing some code for that one. We don't need this user form click. But what do we do need? We do need the OK button. So let's click on the OK button here and let's take a look at this. So now again, all we have to do is right click. Again, just like we did before. So click. So empty this out and then just right click, type and click. Now some versions of it have it already, but we're just going to type it in, click. Okay, so it has a click. So what do we want to do? The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that user has entered values for all the forms. So we're going to check for required fields. Next up, so if expense date dot value equals empty or expense amount dot value equals empty or expense category dot value equals empty, then what do I want to do? Message box, please make sure to fill in all fields before saving. Okay, exit sub. Nothing else we can do unless the user has filled out. Now, moving on, of course they have now, so let's dimension the expense row as long, because we need to set an expense row as long. And what is that expense row? It's going to be based on sheet 2. The expense row is equal to sheet 2, those are expenses, dot range, and we can use column A 999, dot end, XL up, dot row. That's going to get us the last row of the value, but I want the first available row. So in that case, it's going to be +1. So first available row. Now that we have the first available row, we just simply need to write the code in that's going to put it in there. We don't need data mapping. It's only 3 lines. So let's just write that sheet 2 dot range A and the expense row dot value equals what? Simple. Equals expense date dot value. And that would be the date, expense. This one's going to be super easy on VBA code, expense date. And then again, we can just copy that and then just update it for both columns B and C very easily. Paste that in there, paste that in there. And this one, of course, is going to be called category. And this one will be the amount. Amount is located in column C, and then B is for the category. And then we just have to update this. This would be expense category, and this would be expense amount. Okay, I think we've got everything right. That looks pretty good. So we've got hide, we've got the OK button, we've got the user form activate. Okay, good. Now we've got that, we need to do a few more. What else do we need to do? I want to hide the form once they've done it. Add expense form dot hide. I want to hide it. We no longer need the form. And then I'm going to unload the form, which clears out the form. Unload. And then add expense form. Okay, so we're looking good. We've got everything written. Now we do is double click. Let's try that out and see what we've got. The current date in the right format. Let's go in $45 here, and let's select a category, bills, and click OK. Perfect. Now let's take a look down. Bills and utilities, $45 under April. Looking very good. All right, that's it for adding expenses. Now what we need to do is write a macro that's going to add this and create that pop-up form. Very simple. Inside our expense macros, here we go. All we need to do is write a simple sub, procedure sub, add expense. And what do I want to do on that? Add expense form dot show. Simple as that. Or we can just copy this and then go into our sheet here. Right click this, add the macro, paste in, click OK. It's the only macro. Now add expense, it's going to be perfect. 25, click on expense, click OK. Nice. Now we have our add. Okay, excellent. Now all we need to do is get these months and years drop down list working just right. So how do we do that? When I click this, I want to display months group. When I click this, I want to display years group. So let's write some code for that. So back into our new module. So let's do that. Let's write a macro that's going to do show and hide. Sub show hide year selection. I want to write one. If, first of all, I want to make sure that the years group, if it's, so what I want to do is if they click this once, it opens. If they click it again, it closes. So I want to use the same macro to both open and close it. So how do we do that? First, we need to check to see if it's visible or not. If sheet1 dot shapes years group, let's double check the name on that. I want to make sure I got the names right. Year group or years group. And let's take a look at that. It's called years group. Okay, so years group dot visible equals true. If it's true, what do we want to do? We want to hide it. Then shapes, then we just have to copy and paste this dot, copy and paste this here. Then paste the dot visible equals MSO false. Nothing else to do because it's open. We just want to close it. Else, what do I want to do? I want to make it visible. Equals simple. Equals MSO true. That's it. That's all I want to do with that. Okay, this should be true. Okay, so we got true. So let's see. If the visible true, then false. So now we've got, that's all we need to do. So I'm going to copy this macro. I'm going to go back into our sheet. I'm going to take on this little arrow here. I'm going to assign the macro, paste it in, click OK. Now when I click this, it hides and shows, exactly what I want to do. Let's do the same thing for the months. Very simple. All I need to do is copy this, macro and make the changes to months. So this would be month selection. And then I'm going to copy this, the words month, and just paste it over because we did everything else the same, exactly the same. And then all we need to do is assign that macro to that. Again, this would be month selection, show or hide month selection. So click on that, click on the group, make sure it's named months group. Click on here, right click, assign the macro, paste it in, click OK. Now when we click here, perfect. Okay, that's what I want. I want to do a few more things. If it's open and I select anywhere on the sheet, I want it to close. Same thing with this. If it's open and I select anywhere on the sheet, those lists should close. So how do we do that? Well, that's on sheet selection change. On sheet, budget sheet, and it's based on selection change. So sub the worksheet, selection change. Now let's write some code. Again, all we need to do is just make sure that those two are hidden. So shapes, we don't need wish shapes. And if they select anything, it should be closed. Months group dot visible equals MSO false, right? I don't want it to show up. Same thing. Shapes years group dot visible equals MSO false. Okay, so basically if they select anything else, both of them get hidden. That's what I want. Open up gets hidden. Open up and select on something gets hidden. Perfect. Now what do I want to do? Now I want to assign a macro to each one of these. This is the super easy part. I can assign the same macro to every single one of those and it's going to work. All I want to do is take the name of whatever shape. Notice we named the shape 2020. We named the shape 2021, 2022. Same thing for months. We named the shape January. So all I need to do is take the shape name and put it right in E2 or take the shape name and put it in B2. How do we do that? I can do that with just one line of code actually. So let's write a macro for each one of those. Sub year select. So what do we do on that? Sheet 1 dot range B2, that's our year, B2 dot value equals what? Application dot color. That is going to tell us the application color. And what else I want to do? I just want to hide. I want to hide the years group. Actually, I wrote that in the wrong area. Let's write that. I'm going to paste that, get rid of that. It's not the right place for that. We want to be inside the module for that. And that's what I want to be. I want to put it here. Sub year select. I'm going to do the same thing for months. Sub month select. I'm going to do the same thing here. So what is it? Again, sheet 1. And this time it's not sheet 1. It's E2, right? Dot range E2 dot value equals application dot color. Don't forget sheet 1. Sheet 1 dot shapes month group dot visible equals MSO false. Okay, and you got to add sheet 1 up here too because it's inside the sub sheet 1. Okay, good. So now we've got year select and month select. So now all I need to do is copy year select, go in, select here, select the entire group of all the years, assign the macro, and paste this. I can do the same thing with months. Right click, assign the macro, and select month select. Now what are we going to do? Now select there, month, January already, that looks good. February, perfect. March, good. Very little data for those. January, nice. I really like that. What about the year? 2020, good. There's no data for the year 2020. It's fine. That's exactly what I want to show. So we create this really cool drop down list, shape based. Very, very cool, just by simply selecting that. Let's bring that over a little bit. It needs to be over a little bit to the right. It's a little bit too far for the larger months names. So I like that. In fact, I'm going to bring the whole group over here. Right, justify that. Align to the right so that everything's justified. That looks nice. That looks a little bit nicer. You notice there's a little bit of transparency on it, which looks good. I really like that. It's looking really good at expense. All right, let's take a quick look over that and see if everything's accurate before I let you go on this one. All right, it's looking really good. I hope you have enjoyed this personal monthly budget. Feel free to download this for free using the links in the description below. If you'd like to get over 100 of these, I have a $37 zip file. I'll include the links down below if you want to purchase 37. That helps keep these videos for free, and it gets you well over 100 workbooks. All of the best templates on Excel. All right, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it on the personal monthly budget. Next week will be something brand new. Have a great week. Thanks so much.